Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us as part of the Olin Roofing series of webinars as we present Inspecting Your Roof from the Ground. I'm Dan Hamilton, Director of Sales and Marketing here at Olin, and your co-pilot for this webinar. Today we are going to provide useful tips and ways to inspect your roof from the ground. As much as this may be hard to believe, winter will soon be leaving us, and when it does, it can sometimes leave roofing issues behind. The purpose behind today is to show you simple ways to identify and perhaps even stop those issues from becoming problems. Roofs are expensive, so some forethought and a simple inspection can sometimes, can sometimes stop the molehill from becoming a mountain, saving you hundreds or even thousands of dollars in the process. Let me call your attention to the chat box on the right of our screen. If you do have questions during our session today, please feel free to ask them using that chat box. We'll be sure to leave time for questions and answers at the end of our session. I expect this webinar to last 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the amount of questions we receive. And now it gives me great pleasure to bring in Mike St. Pierre of Olin Roofing. Mike is a senior roof diagnostic specialist with the company. He's completed over 700 projects. He's a 5-time Roofing Specialist of the Year and a 4-time Customer Service Gold Medal recipient. Mike is certainly extremely credible and highly decorated a roofing professional as you're ever going to find. Mike, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, Dan. Anything to help out with what everyone has to deal with as far as roofing and the problems that can come with it. It certainly can be argued that a roof and a foundation are the most important parts of a home. Both are supposed to keep out your biggest nemesis of any dwelling, which is water. Questions that you might ask yourself are, is the $40,000 kitchen or bathroom remodel worth anything if the roof above is breached and destroys new rooms? I plan on discussing how homeowners can be proactive in analyzing their roofing and similar related parts of the house. We will spend time on roofing basics, ventilation, insulation, gutters, fascia, soffit, and rake boards, and how to inspect those from the ground.
So with the roof inspection, the idea behind this is to keep it simple. They should take less than an hour. As we said, we're inspecting your roof from the ground, so all of this can be done from the ground. You're not necessarily going to need a ladder or anything else with you. We want to catch small issues before they become big problems. The idea being small issues can become larger issues, can become big problems with breaches in the roof and so forth. The idea is to save you lots of money.
And all good points, Dan, and I think it's important to start off with safety. Absolutely critical. Too many people are severely hurt or worse every year due to improper ladder use or accidents. Professionals should always be considered strongly before any homeowner starts getting the ladder out of the garage with the intent of getting on the roof. In less than an hour, as Dan had mentioned, you could stay ahead of the repairs. I will discuss and potentially save thousands of dollars to you by early detection and project repair. For example, during a random homeowner inspection, a homeowner may discover some of the caps on the top of the ridge vent may have blown off. This can lead to someone calling in a professional like myself, and that professional identifying the caps, the ridge vent itself due to clogging, and insufficient intake or soffit venting as problem areas needed to repair. By having this repair done, the homeowner may save the cost of new sheathing, a new roof, and mold remediation. This could end up saving $25,000 to $35,000. All this by spending 45 minutes walking around your house and spending a few minutes in the attic or crawl space.
So as we can see, by doing this, by being proactive and taking a little bit of time this spring, you can literally save yourself thousands of dollars. So, Mike, what would you recommend a person take with them when they set out to inspect their roof from the ground?
That's a great question, Dan. To inspect your roof and related areas, all that is needed is time, a pen and something to write on, a pad of paper, a pair of binoculars. All of those would be sufficient to get a good, accurate early indication of what's going on with the roofing. When I am at some of the home shows at our booth, I cannot count how many times homeowners have pictures on their phone to show me. This is another great proactive way to approach what you need for your roof. And as I have many times during a home show, looked at 10, 20 pictures of a certain area, whether it's an ice dam that could potentially lead to mold, whether it's a fascia board that might have a problem and that could lead to water coming into the roofing area and then inevitably into the home. These types of proactive measures can certainly save you tens of thousands of dollars by catching them early.
So, Mike, in your experience then, if a homeowner is out doing their inspection and they come across something that maybe they can't completely identify, but they recognize as being wrong, improper, unusual, would you recommend that they take a picture, and then if they are going to speak to a roofing professional, they have that information? They can even send it, I guess, before the first meeting, right?
Yeah, and that's a real good way to put it. Having the more from my perspective, when I go out to a potential homeowner's situation or a repair item that might be needed, when I have pictures or a clear idea of exactly what's going on, it allows me to kind of mentally go through my file cabinet and figure out, okay, well, I'm going to go to these 3 different files, and that's probably where the problem lies. Of course, nothing is like being there. However, this will at least give me a jump start.
Prep time, always
Exactly.
important, right? So just a couple notes as we dig into this today. Olin, as a roofing company, we recommend that you inspect your roof twice a year, preferably in the spring and in the fall. If you need to do one, do it in the spring. Obviously, the winters here can be tough. That's where the majority of problems can stem from. So if you need to do one, do it in the spring. Anytime you're going to inspect the roof, it's at the top of the house. A ladder is preferable, but a ground inspection is perfectly fine if you aren't comfortable climbing. And we're going to give you tips and tricks today to make your ground inspection equally as beneficial to you as if you were up there with a ladder yourself. One thing that people often forget is that half of your roof is visible from the attic. So if you can get up there and take a look at the entire underside and all those roof boards, usually is going to lead you in the direction of, hey, there's a problem here, or boy, the other side, boy, this looks healthy. Penetrations equal leaks. So what I mean by that is anywhere you've got something coming through the roof, be it the chimney or vent pipes or anything else, those tend to be problem areas. Just an important note before we really get started with our inspection from the ground today is this. The purpose of this webinar is to show you how a simple inspection can save you lots of time and money by identifying issues before they become big problems. It's not to make everybody a roofing expert.
That's correct, Dan. I think it's important. I've mentioned it once already, and I think it's worth mentioning again. Please be super careful anytime that you do decide to take a ladder and go up on your roof. As a roofing professional and expert, I'm going up there with lots of years of experience on a roof. I'm also going up there on difficult roofs that I know about with tie downs and a second person with me as well. Safety should be very, very much considered during any of these inspections. So I like the fact that Dan was able to tell you that you can certainly, and I agree, you can certainly get a lot from a ground inspection. Although, as we spoke about, an inspection twice a year would be ideal, I do realize that the 4-letter word life gets in the way. If an inspection is done at least once a year, you can certainly minimize and mitigate the damages on your roof.
So, Mike, give us a high-level overview of the components to a roof so that as you reference things later on in this, people will understand what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So, yeah, this is really just a quick rundown of the different pieces or parts of a roof that make up a complete roofing system. It's important to think of your roof that way. If it's thought of as just a bunch of shingles on the roof, then it's almost the analogy of oil is oil, where we all know synthetic oil, semi-synthetic oil. They're important for various engines in the automotive industry, similar to roofing. So we'll look at this as a roofing system, and I'm going to break that apart the best I can for you. If we start at the peak of the roof, and it's just an area that we'll start for today, we'll start by looking at the ridge vent. This traditionally is a ventilation product that allows heat and humidity to escape at the peak or the top of your roof. This will be covered by roofing shingle caps as well. It's extremely important due to this ventilation. It's important to also remember, without proper ventilation and the way that houses are built so tight today, it's very, very easy for a roof attic area to all of a sudden create mold and mildew. And now you've got not only an area that's unhealthy, but you have an area that is going to need attention right away.
So roofs need to breathe.
Roofs absolutely need to breathe.
Got it.
And that's why I wanted to start at the ridge vent itself. Now, your house may not have a ridge vent. Pretty much pre-1985, ridge vents really weren't the de facto part of a roof system. Things have changed. The ridge vent, like I said before, is going to take that hot air and humidity that naturally rises in a house and expel it through the vent, keeping the temperature down. When an attic space is hot, shingles can bake from the inside out. The secondary underlayment is what covers the rest of the decking. So now we've jumped from the ridge vent and the importance of that to secondary decking, or secondary underlayment, which is going to cover from that peak area on both sides of any roof plane, whether it's the main house, an addition, or a garage, and that's going to come down and cover, which I'm going to get into, the ice and water shield. Between the ice and water shield and the secondary underlayment, that in essence is going to cover your entire decking or roof sheathing area. The ice and water shield, the way that we install that here is we're going to go 6 feet up with that, from the eaves all up 6 feet. But it's important that when you get to the edge or the eave of the roof, we're going to overlap the fascia board. And without doing so, you leave a chance for water and ice and snow that's caught up in the gutter to attack that edge of the roof. We also do something called a roof apron, and the roof apron would then cover that ice and water shield, and that's one of the parts of our roofing systems. And the roof apron would cover that ice and water shield, protecting it from inclement weather and also fitting into the back of the gutter. So this is kind of besides the ice and water shield, you use the roof apron to make sure that additionally you don't let moisture and water and ice through getting under the ice and water shield, creating problems.
So you've got ice and water shield coming down over the fascia, and then you put an apron over that to protect that.
Correct. Got it. Correct. Then on top of that would be the drip edge, and the drip edge the way again we do this is we're going to run the drip edge along every eave of the roof and also every gable end or the rake sides of the roof. And so, in essence, the whole perimeter of the roof is covered with the drip edge. Now, some may ask, is this important on the non-eave areas? Because obviously the eaves below them are gutters. And it is important. One, it's important along the eaves because you're going to kick the water via the drip edge into the gutter below it. On the gable ends or the A-frame sides of the house where there are not gutters, it's important because you're going to kick water away from the home. When you don't have a drip edge along those gable ends, water can easily get behind your siding. That can lead to popping out siding. It can lead to corrosion. It can lead to, worst case scenario, mold and mildew. So very important, the drip edge being around the entire perimeter of the home.
So, Mike, now we've got our inspection tools, right? But before we go outside, what should we be looking for?
Right. You know, it's important. The chimney is an area that we haven't talked about. It's very easy to see when the lead around a chimney or the counter base flashing, as I call it, when that area starts to pull out and it pulls away from the brick of the chimney. That's a very good indication that it's time to have that replaced. Now, anytime that, you know, this is quality roofing, but anytime you do strip and reshingle a house, you'd almost always want to replace the base flashing and the counter base flashing, again, the lead, on a chimney. Those leads don't last forever, and it's important to do, and unless a mason had been there within the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
But that can all be seen from the ground. It's important to take a look at the drip edge and make sure that that hasn't loosened or fallen off. Vent pipes must be checked as well. Look for deteriorating rubber or flashing that is lifting around these vents. These are all entry areas for water to seep into your interior living area.
Sure.
Checking the gutters to make sure they are flush against the fascia board. That's the piece of wood the gutters rest up against. You can certainly see from the picture above that, if you have skylights, you're going to want to check the inside and make sure that you don't see, like the picture shows, where water is seeping through. Traditionally, there's going to be two spots where a skylight's going to leak, and it's either the seal that's between the two pieces of glass, or it's going to be the actual flashing around the skylight during installation. Both of these do not last forever, so it's important to keep an eye on when you start to see any kind of staining or watermarks like in the picture.
So we start our inspection, we're still inside the house, and we're looking, I guess, really in each room of the house to make sure that we don't have staining or anything going on there. You had mentioned to me in preparation of this, don't forget closets, which is something that sometimes people can overlook. They tend to be on exterior walls at times in a home, and they tend to show leaks, but whether it's clothes or other storage items, they sometimes get missed,
Mm-hmm.
Right, we're looking for areas around penetrations, the chimney, the fireplace, skylights, all of that sort of stuff inside the house.
Correct. And, a lot of times, like Dan had said, the closet areas are fit right underneath a valley in the house. It's very important to keep an eye on where the valleys are in conjunction to the interior of the home. That's a real trouble-zoned area. Really, the three most common areas of leaking on any roof are going to be your chimney, valleys, and wall areas. Now, wall areas are very simple to explain. Where the asphalt shingle or cedar shingle or slate shingle, for that matter, meets up with the siding of the house in any area, that's a wall area, and that's suspect to water leaking due to whether the flashing is old or decrepit and starts to allow moisture and water through.
Gotcha.
So what I like to do is look at each roof plane, determine if this is from inside the attic. You can certainly see if the sheathing is warped. You can see this from the inside, from the outside. And if you look at each roof plane, you'll be able to tell, is there any warping there? That tells you right away that there is heat and humidity building up in the attic space, and that has to be addressed.
So do you want to talk about that, then what to look for inside the attic?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so let's go to that. What to look for inside the attic. Mike, take it away.
Okay. As you make your way into the attic, the fun really begins at this point. So right away, you've got your flashlight, you've got your pad of paper, watch your head. You will notice there are hundreds of nails sticking through the sheathing, and that's that they should be. You would never stop a nail just into the sheathing. It has to be through. These nails that are used are called ring nails, and you want those ring nails to expose through the sheathing. In any event, watch your head. You could easily stab yourself. So be careful. That's my point. Let's start at the top or peaks of your roof when you're in the attic. Just sit or stand for a minute and see if you can feel any movement of air, and notate that. If it feels very stuffy, it most likely is. If you feel some flow of air, then you might have good intake or soffit venting, and as well you'll have good exhaust or ridge venting, or a power fan if that's your exhaust method, or a solar fan if that's your exhaust method. Check to make sure you actually have a ridge vent. You'll be able, if you didn't see it from the ground, you'll certainly be able to see it when you're in the attic. If you do have a ridge vent, see if it's clogged. Some of the older ridge vents that were used were basically take a sponge and cut it in half, and that's the density of old ridge vents. And if you think of that density, it's very easy for the heat and humidity which rises to fill those vents and clog them. So as long as you're taking these notes, this will again prepare you for when it's time to talk to a professional. Notate if there's any staining coming from chimney areas. There'll be light and dark colored stains around the sheathing near a chimney or a vent pipe or any area where water is penetrating. The darker the stains is going to be the newer stains. The lighter the stains are, they're older, but at least it tells you that I've had a leaking roof for a while. It's important to remember, too, when it comes to leaks, your roof could be leaking for a couple of years without you knowing. Water has to penetrate through the shingle, through any penetration, get into the sheathing, drop down into the insulation, soak that up, and then eventually it's on the underneath of your ceiling. And then it takes a while for the water to penetrate through the ceiling to where you start to see a stain. So even though you may see a stain in a particular room, it might be a quarter size. However, the leaking might have been going on for a long time, and there could be other damages. So anytime you see any type of staining from a ceiling in any part of your house, it's important to get on top of that right away to avoid the mold situation.
So those attic roof boards, or even the limited wall spaces in an attic, really provide the key. Because like you said, you may have just a little spot stain in your bedroom, but if you've got wet boards up there, you've got a breach in your roof, right?
You've absolutely got a breach in your roof, but you've also left the area, meaning the sheathing and the insulation below, a perfect breeding ground for mold and mildew.
Sure.
And so for those reasons, and to avoid mold remediation companies and the costs that come with them, it's important to get someone out immediately and avoid that.
Right. So to wrap up the attic, folks, I mean, I guess the best way to think about it is this. Things should be healthy and dry there. There should be some airflow. You should be able to, that attic, especially in the wintertime, that attic should be cold. It should really be almost as cold as it is outside without the wind factor involved. So when you go up there, it should be noticeably cold. If it's not, you're probably not insulated properly.
Correct.
Check the underside of your roof boards. Check for stains. Check for sagging. Check around pipes and other penetrations. And look and see, how are my soffit vents? Those are at the eaves of your roof. They should be clear. You should, in the dark, be able to see a little bit of light coming from the outside. If not, you may have too much insulation build up right at those edges, and that's going to affect your intake, where the air comes in, travels up the roof, and then ultimately goes out the ridge vent.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. And also at this point, unless you have a covered, floored attic, it's a real good time to at least take a tape measure or a measuring stick and see how many inches of insulation you currently have. Right now, the ideal scenario would be somewhere in the 12-inch range, whether it's blown in or whether it's the pink bat insulation. So 12 inches is kind of what you're looking for there. A lack of that will certainly add to additional heat, humidity rising into the attic, which will also add to ice dams during the winter. So really the ventilation is critical, intake and exhaust, as well as the insulation.
You're probably in a lot of under-insulated homes.
I am.
Yeah.
I'd say probably 80% of the homes I go into.
Okay, so we've looked around inside the house, we've looked up in the attic, and now we're outside. So take us through what we should be looking for outside.
Well, I think by looking at the examples on this slide, it's easy to see what to look for. Once shingles begin to buckle or curl, the chances for leaking and roof failure become paramount. At the top right, you will see shingle caps have blown off. Many reasons can make this happen. Just be sure to take notes on what you see. If you're missing 2 or 3 shingles around a vent pipe, that's going to be a very easy place for water to come in and enter your house. This allows water entry into your home, as I just mentioned. Right. We now turn to the ugly side of roofing. When chimney flashing becomes an issue, there is only one repair, which is new base flashing, counter base flashing, which is the lead that you see, and not a bucket of roofing tar, as seen at the top left. Realistically, over 90% of all roof repairs are done with roofing tar. It is important for me to note, these are all very short-term fixes and not correct. When a valley is leaking, like in the top right picture, covering it up will only allow water to look for new places to leak into the home. The same goes for the tar patch and the wall area patches below. These are all what I call handyman specials. Now, also, during your inspection outside, certainly take a look at the gutters. A lot can be learned by what is in the gutters. If there are plenty of granules in the gutters, you can be certain that the shingles need to be replaced. The lower left is an example of rotted fascia, which is allowing water to enter into your attic and most likely down the wall, and stains will begin to appear on the ceilings below. Water can easily travel down to the first floor due to this and should be considered critical. Rotten soffit boards are also an indication that water is entering the attic and home areas. If you discover either of these issues, a phone call to a roofing expert is imminent.
So, Mike, what should a person do then if they uncover these sorts of issues?
You know, even though some of these damages can be repaired by homeowners and handymen, they are all very short-term fixes and will require an expert to properly repair these damages. I would certainly think it would be a real smart idea to get in touch with an expert roofer to take care of these. Unfortunately, almost 40% of new roofs we install are less than 5 years old, which is a scary number. And really, this is a combination of things. Poor craftsmanship, cheap materials, the wrong materials. I've seen many contractors who are specialists in siding, painting, kitchens, etc., and they decide now they're roofing experts and they want to get into the roofing industry. That, my friend, is where I say caveat emptor. Beware of who you hire and make sure the workmanship warranties are real.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Just a couple quick numbers about the home improvement industry in general. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing there's about 800,000 home improvement contractors in the U.S. 50% of those fail within the first 3 years. Home improvements are ranked #1 in customer complaints by the National Association of the Remodeling Industry, very reputable group. These complaints are primarily a result of three things: the lowest priced person or the handyman, incomplete contract details where the job isn't scoped accurately, or broken promises, scams, shortcut, leaving too early. I mean, everybody's heard the horror stories of they put the deposit down and then the contractor didn't show up, or they put the deposit down or they maybe even paid in full and the job was left half completed. These are all very real things. It bothers us here at Olin because we try to do things the right way, and when you have people running around, giving your industry a bad name, that doesn't help anyone. It certainly doesn't. So with all of that in mind, be happy to take your questions at this time. I'd also like to point out that Mike can be reached at 781-686-4399 or at mikes@olinroofing.com. Again, 781-686-4399 or mikes@olinroofing.com. As I queue up a couple questions, Mike, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
I think you hit on a lot of it as far as what to watch out for as a homeowner, and the only one I'd add to that, and this kind of leads right into scams, is there are a group of people out there that we call storm chasers, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in the New England area. So when there's a hailstorm or a rash of ice dams that are creating problems or entering roofs and houses, these storm chasers catch wind, and they're not located here. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the credentials to do this work. However, they show up at your house and say that they're going to work with your insurance company, and before you know it, you've signed on with them, and in turn, you either don't get the work done or you get done really a poor job, which shows itself in the next 2 to 3 years by leaking. So that I would say be very, very careful of, and always look for a reputable company.
Mike, we had a question come in that said, I looked at my roof before the snow. It seemed okay. What should I look at on my gutters? So could you just take, a couple sentences here on what to look for in a gutter inspection from the ground?
Right. Well, what I like to do is first take a look at your downspouts. When you look at your downspouts, behind the downspout or up against the house, that's a seam in the downspout. It's called a stamped seam. Now, over time, over age, and especially with X amount of gallons and gallons and gallons of water, these seams start to split open. So that's a real good indication right away that it's time to start preparing to replace your at least your downspouts. That's the beginning of it. Now, if your gutters were installed at the same time, most likely the gutters as well. However, let's focus on the gutters themselves. If you see that the gutters, there should always be a pitch or a slope that the gutter brings the water from the roof to the downspout. Over winters, with heavy ice, snow, and water in those gutters, including ice, the pitch can change on you. That can leave a warped gutter. Now the slope has been erased, and water sits there and waits to freeze and then come up under your eave and into your home. So keeping an eye on that. Also, older gutters were not seamless, and a lot of those connection areas have broken away and left leaking water coming through. That's a problem as well. Also, look at the fasteners. That if you see the gutter itself pulling away from the fascia board, that's a good indication that the weight of the ice and the snow during winters has pulled the gutter away from the fascia. This can lead to damaging the trim boards or the fascia and the soffit boards, which can lead to a very costly repair. So those are the items that I would look for.
Great. We had another question come in, the tricky one too, asking, in your opinion, what's the average lifespan of an existing roof now?
That's a great question. I would say the shingles that were made 22, 23 years ago, if the roof was installed properly with the correct underlayments and so forth that we discussed earlier, right around that 22, 23-year marker. Now, today's batch of shingles, all of the shingle manufacturers that we use here, we've been to their heat rooms and their ice rooms, and there's a lot more technology involved in today's shingles and how long they'll last. So what we're looking at is 50-year shingles, and from all the indications that I've seen, and I know, Dan, you've come with me on some of these trips, and it looks like we won't know until the time comes, of course, but it looks like 40 to 45 years is a realistic scenario for new shingles.
Roofing technology's really changed. There's no question about it. Things have become lighter and yet more durable, breathable.
Mm-hmm.
But the strength nowadays is second to none. The materials, I think, underneath the roof, which are often overlooked.
Yes.
I mean, the ice and water shield and the underlayment, it's all high performance, breathable.
Right.
And getting back to why people should be careful, there's still plenty out there using the old, fly and tar paper, but there are certainly high-performing, far superior products on the marketplace that I know Mike, you'd be happy to talk to him about if people have questions. I think that wraps up our webinar for today. I can't thank you guys enough for joining us here in the Olin Roofing webinar series. Again, Mike can be reached at 781-686-4399 or at Mike S. at Olin Roofing if you have any further questions. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the winter/spring that we're in, and we look forward to talking to everybody again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.